So, welcome to Baku. Baku is the host this year, the city in Azerbaijan of COP29, the next iteration of the world's efforts to deal with climate change. We are broadcasting live from our studio here in the diplomatic zone of COP29 and right on the edge of the Caspian Sea, actually, which is very beautiful indeed. We're going to cover a wide range of topics from Baku during these broadcasts, and we're going to have a lot of amazing guests over the days we have this week and next week. And of course, we're going to try and follow the negotiations as well, which are a stone's throw from us here in the media centre. In our broadcast, we'll have a very special and daily focus on the issue of methane gas. We think this could be a real game changer for our struggle to keep the planet safe from climate change and its people. Ingmar Rentzhog, you're the founder and the CEO of We Don't Have Time, and you have become passionate about this topic. What is it, and what's this new campaign that we're launching today, which you have kind of soft launched a little bit in the last few days?
Yes, so BuyMoreTime, that the campaign's name is that we have the solutions. Many solutions are scaling. We are on track on decarbonizing the society. That's no question about. But it's happening not fast enough, and we now have only 5 years left to halve the emission, and we have just flattened it out. Mm-hmm. So instead of 10 years, it's 5 years.
It was 10 years in Glasgow, wasn't
exactly.
it? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So time is running out, and the political system right now, with climate denialists in the White House, etc., is making everything, if not impossible, extremely hard. So in order to make it on time, we need to focus on every climate action we can do today that will have that will give the best effect on the shortest time frame. Mm-hmm. We also need to work on the long time frame, of course. So it's not either or, it's that we need to do more here and now. And BuyMoreTime is all about focusing on the short-lived climate gases, like methane and other gases. The difference between the short-lived climate gases and the long-lived, like carbon dioxide, is that the short-lived are only in the atmosphere for a short time period. That means that if we stop emitting the short-lived climate gases, the global warming will actually start to go down. So we will get more time to do everything else.
Okay.
So that's what BuyMoreTime is all about.
Okay. Interesting, because I mean, sometimes when you say to people, buy more time, they think, oh, that's fine, we don't have to do anything. I can put my feet up, I can watch the football, get a few drinks out, do nothing. But it's not that at all, isn't it? It's about bringing everything into play right now to buy us some time.
It's very stupid if we are buying more time, we need to use that time to do what we do, to decarbonize. If we are just buying more time and continue with business as usual, that will not help at all.
Yeah. So you made a really interesting and actually entertaining, because we need to entertain people to get their attention in a sense, speech at the Tech Arena in Stockholm, where we were filming just a few weeks ago with some also amazing guests. I think it might be worth giving the audience a little look into that speech. And could we play Ingmar's speech on BuyMoreTime at the Tech Arena in Stockholm, please?
This is the climate crisis today. We're kind of leaning backwards. And the more emission we put up there, the more we're leaning it. But we can still do this, right? The problem, if we pass 1.5 degree, and we're very near, we're kind of there, but if we stay there and we just keep going up, there is a big, big risk of hitting a tipping point. And when we hit a tipping point, this share will be very, very hard to put back up. So this is what we must avoid for the climate. And we have a cure for this. The only thing we need in order to make it is more time. We need to buy more time. And now we feel the resistance from the politicians, but when we're up here, they will not resist the green transition because the green transition are the majority. So the policy will change when the technology changes, but we need more time. So how can we get more time? The problem with carbon dioxide, when we emit it, it will go up. And it will stay up there for up to 1,000 years. Maybe we can kind of try to remove it, but it looks kind of hard to do it, very expensive. Methane is another greenhouse gas. It's a very common greenhouse gas. It's the second biggest contributor to global warming. And there's a big difference between methane and carbon dioxide. When we release this, it comes down again. On average 12 years. It's a big difference between 1,000 years, 12 years. So the solution here is that we need to stop emit methane. And if we do that, we can actually reverse global warming with up to 0.5 degrees. That is the time we need to do everything else, because we still need to stop the carbon dioxide. So this is great news. And where does this methane come from? This is one of the sources. Bananas. Waste, food waste. 20% of methane emission comes from waste. But guess what? When I arrived here this morning, I took the bus, and the bus in Sweden, in Stockholm, are powered with bioenergy. We don't emit hardly any methane from waste. So other countries can do the same. 45% from methane comes from the fossil fuel industry. And this is a lot of emission that is really easy to fix. It's just fix the pipe. Cows are burping 4 times every 5 minutes. Agriculture adds up to 40% of the methane emissions. Many companies working on this, where you have a food additive, and you give that to the cows, and they burp up to 80% less. So what do we need? We need to look at the fridge. All the fridges we had when I was a kid were powered by a dangerous gas. And when that was released up in the air, it was destroying the ozone layer. If we hadn't fixed it, we will not be able to walk outside today and show naked skin. But we're not doing that, because the industry, the manufacturers of the fridges, the chemical companies, and bold world leaders met in Montreal, where they decided to ban freons, phase it out, put the funding behind it, and today we have perfectly fresh food and we don't use freon anymore. Isn't it great? It saved humanity once, so we can do it twice. And there is one more thing. This year, in Mars, there was a new satellite launched that is called the methane satellite. And it will measure open data where we have emission from methane, leakage, and we will know exactly where we need to fix the problem. We don't have that for any other climate gases, but we have it for methane. So a legal system, some funding, and the data is everything we need. And this is what BuyMoreTime is all about. We can do this.
So, in collaboration with the United Nations Environment Programme's hosted Climate and Clean Air Coalition, we have a very special daily focus on this year on super pollutants and especially on methane. Which is why I'm delighted to welcome here in the studio, here in Baku at COP29, Martina Otto. She's head of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. Hi, Martina.
Hello, Nick.
Yep,
Pleasure
hi.
to be here with you.
It's great to see you too. So, Martina, for the audience out there, we may have 5 million people watching the show right now in, like 160 countries. Can you briefly explain where are the methane emissions coming from? And what could happen if the world could achieve really big, rapid, fast, scaled up cuts in this gas?
Right. Absolutely. Well, methane is a key lever for us. It's probably the best, maybe the only bet that we have to put us on a 1.5 pathway. Now, let me explain that. Methane is extremely powerful. It's about 80 times more powerful than CO2 with regard to warming potential, and that over a shorter period of time of 20 years. So that means if we reduce methane, it is not accumulating in the atmosphere, but it actually drives down. And that means we have a lever on near-term warming. And that is a little bit the lifeboat that we may have. You said buying time, but it's exactly that. In terms of the impact, we save a bit of time for the decarbonization efforts to come into effect. And we can avoid some of those tipping points. And 1.5 was not coming out of thin air. It was a moment to think that then some changes in the ecosystems, for example, will happen. And that may be irreversible. And if we take action on methane, we are able to rein that in. Now, we have done a global methane assessment that showed action needs to be taken in the fossil fuel sector, in the agriculture sector, in the waste sector. And we're not talking about net zero as we do with CO2. We talk about 60 to 80% of reductions in the fossil fuel sector. We talk about 30 to 35% in the waste sector. We talk about 25% in the agricultural sector. And that is absolutely doable, and it's doable at low and often even at negative cost. And we can, and that's the absolute beauty of it, we can harness health benefits because these pollutants are also air pollutants, and we can harness food security benefits as well because there's an impact on our ecosystems and how our plant growth is impeded.
Okay, good. That's very comprehensive. So multiple benefits we have, not just including climate change, and it would seem, as you say, because the costs of it are not so outrageous, that in fact negative costs in many of these cases, if not all, that it would seem to be a great investment for society to make in the future of our planet and its people. Let me just get this clear in my head because we were talked a little bit before, but we're here at COP29. One of the big issues, or two of the big issues, are governments revising up their national climate action plans, the so-called NDCs, which use the jargon, and you want to see, and I think a lot of other people who care passionately about this topic want to see the NDCs here, and as we go to Brazil next year for the next climate conference, to have methane really embedded in the plans of nations. So that's correct, yes?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Good. And the other thing is this COP is about finance, and we need finance for this, which turns us really back to what I want you to ask a little bit, or I want to ask you a little bit about what is the theme of today's show. So give us a perspective into what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. This COP is branded the Finance COP, and we need to get more finance into methane action. We have seen it's about at 2% of climate finance that goes into methane action. That needs to be stepped up at least 3.5 times to make the dent that we need to see. And one key step for that is actually to include methane in these nationally determined contributions. And why is that? Because it gives a strong policy signal with a target. And I think it's clear the money follows the ambition. And that means these NDCs become investment plans for the future. Now, the Global Methane Pledge has a target to reduce methane by 30% from 2020 levels by 2030. So there's a 2030 element. The NDCs that are due now, the revisions, will take us to exactly that period. And at the same time, we have scientists who've told us that we might hit 1.5 already within the next 5 years. So that brings it really home why it's critical to have methane and other short-lived climate pollutants embedded in these NDCs. And we have put out, the CCAC, we have put out guidance on how to do that, to help countries to do that. That was a special request that we got. We're also supporting over 30 countries with exactly that process. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing more of that.
Right. And Martina, I think you've already mentioned, but with these concerted efforts, with ambitious action on methane, plus also keeping the pressure on the decarbonisation of the global economy, this is not an either-or situation. This is about making sure the searchlight is on all the pollutants that cause climate change. In the past, maybe the methane and these other super pollutants were a little bit more in the shade or not in the dark in some cases if we go back long enough, bringing them out, illuminating them so that everyone knows they're there, what they do and what benefits we could get if we acted hard whilst also keeping up the pedal on CO2. So it's not an either-or situation.
No, it's not an either-or situation, and we actually really have to make sure that this finance ecosystem that is really coming together is moving forward. And we, for example, are working with the multilateral development banks. We call it a handshake process. We are working with the bilateral donors in the development aid system context to look at, could there be criteria to actually make sure that methane is not sort of an afterthought, but that it's actually really built in, and maybe some of the health benefits are built in as well. We have seen philanthropies coming forward, very much so. They've really stepped up. But then it becomes almost, who is doing what best, and how can we stitch the different levels of funding together in a way that it really adds up.
Yeah, got you. Good. So we're now going to be welcoming in a few seconds our special guest, but I think we've got what's known as a bumper first. So let's have our bumper. So let's meet some more terrific guests that are joining us on the show here at COP29 in Baku in Azerbaijan. I'm going to introduce first Marcelo Mina, the CEO of the Global Methane Hub, who's with us in our studio today. That's fantastic. Marcelo, how is your work contributing to what I might say bridging the finance gap we have right now between methane action and methane funding?
Great, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with our colleagues here from CCAC, from the COP presidency, and of course our colleagues at the World Bank, I assume in Washington, DC. So we are working, we came about when the Global Methane Pledge was launched 3 years ago. It's been 3 years and 158 countries have joined. But when they joined this methane pledge, they said, well, you need to help us learn how to do this because it's something new, it's new road, it's new sectors that we have overlooked: waste, agriculture, energy. And so we've been able to deploy already around $250 million in grant funding to help countries have methane targets, including groups like the CCAC, who's helped many groups. We also have been working supporting the China commitments and having different technical capacities be provided so China could have a very important target. They announced for the first time they have On coal methane, they will have a large target because China is a major emitter, and we'll see them in like an hour from now when in the methane summit they show their new progress. And of course, we fund the satellite work, the International Methane Emissions Observatory, but also Carbon Mapper and Methane Sat, which are the major new satellites that today an article in the Financial Times shows that we are going to see the real emissions, not the ones that companies report, and we'll be able to reduce those emissions because many companies have not seen these emissions and they could have that opportunity to address this. So there are many ways. And one last way is the research and development for solutions on agricultural methane and livestock emissions. And so one of the announcements that the summit will have is the $60 million that we have provided along with Bezos Earth Fund and Gates Foundation to reduce emissions with breakthrough technologies on livestock through methane vaccines, feed additives, or improved genomics, selecting animals that have lower methane emissions overall.
Wow, that's amazing. And so quickly that so many countries joined this, right? And I mean, it was really very rapid indeed. And I'm glad you brought up that slight elephant in the room, which is because I was checking all these kind of numbers on what not just companies, but governments report to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change on methane emissions. And you get these amazing graphs when you look at, say, what the satellites show versus even what governments think they're emitting. So it's a really interesting honesty mechanism in a sense to make sure that everybody knows what the situation is, and then they can make the choices about how they deal with it. So
companies self-underreport, but also governments sometimes import emission factors from other countries that don't represent what they're doing. And so therefore a lot of emissions are underestimated because of that reason.
It's good to point that out because I think average person out there, the average normal person goes, well, you know about it, so why don't you do something? But then you suddenly realize, actually, well, we didn't know really quite how big it was. So, now we know the numbers, Okay, that's really good. Marcella, stay with us because we're going to have a little chat later. Let me now introduce Stefania Abercurley. If I said that terribly badly, Stefania, then you must correct me, who is the coordinator of the CH4D, which I think the CH4 stands for methane. That's my schoolboy memory of what the methane molecular structures is done. And that's the initiative of the World Bank. And Stefania, this new finance methane development issue seeks a triple win, I understand, at scale. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve?
Thank you, Nick and Martina and Marcelo, all of you. It's wonderful to see you here from Washington. Nick, first you said my name perfectly. Thank you. The bank, our president, Jay Banga, he launched what we call the methane blueprint last year at COP29. And in the blueprint, it's based very much on the bank experience already on reducing methane, especially from the sectors that Marcelo was talking about, from waste, sanitation, and agriculture. And what we have seen in about a decade of working already on methane reduction is that this is not only a climate agenda, it's an essential good development agenda. That's where the triple wins come from. We have seen the first one, of course, is the mitigation, is the near-term gains we get in terms of reducing this very powerful super pollutant, methane, and other gases like nitrous oxide, black carbon. But also we see an enormous opportunity to build resilience of environmental systems. For instance, when you have a low methane rice cultivation, we have seen results as decreasing in 30-40% use of water, regenerating soils, and etc. And also an increase in economics, which is the third win, what we call empower livelihoods.
Super. And how far, I mean, when did it launch, and are you actually spending any money yet?
Yes, the blueprint was launched last COP at COP28, and right after that, together with the blueprint, he also established two trust funds. One is the Global Methane Reduction for Development, which, as you said, the CH4 standing for methane and D for development, which I coordinate as part of. It's held by the Climate Change Group, where I sit. I'm a climate change specialist. And the other one is the global flaring and methane reduction with my colleague Zubin, who is here as well. We'll talk later about it, focus on the energy. CH4D, we are the hub for methane reduction in the livestock, rice, waste and sanitation subsectors. We came from COP and we already launched our call for proposals. At the moment, we are supporting 24 countries. Our methane blueprint had an initial target of supporting 15 countries to slash about 10 million tons of methane and support 150 million people. And under CH4D, we are already supporting 24 countries. And Zubin will talk about GFMR, which is also supporting a dozen countries on the energy side.
Okay, Stefania, stay with us. We're going to go to our next guest, and I'm leaving that introduction to Martina.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, and Stefania already introduced Zubin Bamji, the manager of the Global Flaring and Methane Reduction Partnership at the World Bank. And Zubin, please tell us a bit more about the partnership, in how far it's special, and I think you also have a call to action for businesses, governments, and financial institutions. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Martina and Nick. Nice to see some familiar faces, all of us working towards the same objective and agenda. So our trust fund, the Global Flaring and Methane Reduction Partnership, was announced at the last COP in Dubai and received support from governments and IOCs, international oil companies, to address the methane and flaring, which we all know represents a significant portion of the total methane emissions globally. So if you were to say that methane is about 30% globally, then out of that 30%, you're looking at about half of those emitters being developing countries. So this is a really important agenda for the World Bank and why we're so interested in supporting developing countries and emerging economies with this program. Now, some of you may recall the World Bank has worked on this for the last 20 years. We were quite early involved in flaring, and we had a small trust fund for the last 20 years that was focused on technical assistance to emerging economies. And this was things like helping them develop policies and regulations, capacity building, strengthening government institutions, this type of work, also doing some monitoring. We've done an annual report on flaring for several years right now, which reports and monitors through satellite detection. But now with our new trust fund, we hope to expand our work, which will include fugitive methane emissions from the oil and gas sector. And then also now we have enough funding to provide some grants, which we didn't have before, which is an exciting new approach for us at the World Bank, because what we hope to do is provide a little bit of financing or catalytic grants to governments and state-owned entities to address this problem, and then also to incentivize other financiers to come into the picture. So we would fund some monitoring and detection campaigns, what we in the industry call LDAR campaigns, which is leak detection and repair. We'll do pre-feasibility studies and feasibility studies, and potentially also provide some grant funding for those studies, which then presents the project to commercial banks, concessional financing, infrastructure financiers, developers of projects that would come in and then provide the rest of the financing to do these projects. So again, the big difference is we expand to include the fugitive methane, which is extremely important, and at the same time also hope to provide a little bit of grant funding from our trust fund.
Just a quick question back to you just on that, because I'm just thinking about the viewers right now. So this money is for developing country oil and gas industry, state companies and maybe private companies, but not necessarily for the richer country or the big private multinational companies, or is it?
No, that's exactly right, Nick.
Yeah.
It is for developing countries in which the World Bank works, right? That's our focus, to support these countries that have the least capacity, bandwidth, and ability to address these missions. So That's where we will focus our efforts, and it's always with the governments or government-owned or state-owned entities. We don't provide support to the private sector.
Right.
Of course, the private sector has their own resources and means to address this. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the average punter, normal person out there would welcome the support for the developing countries, but would be a little bit concerned if taxpayers' money was going to some of the big oil companies that can well afford it. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Just stay with us very much indeed, because we are very excited indeed to have another guest with us who is from the presidency, the host government of COP29. And you, I hope I say this correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So it's Feig Mutalimov, great, who is the head of Environmental Policy Division, Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources for Azerbaijan. And so I understand Azerbaijan is a member of the UN Environment Programme's Climate and Clean Air Coalition since last year. And you've also, I think, got a global methane pledge, which is super. And here at COP29, you're championing many things, but you're also championing the issue of reducing organic waste. So that fits with the methane and the landfill story. It's a declaration which you're hoping to get through by the end of the COP. Tell us a little bit about why this is important for Azerbaijan. Why is it important to get this declaration through, maybe from a domestic point of view, but also, of course, it could help internationally as well. So over to you, Feig.
Thank you very much, first of all, for invitation me to this important meeting. And yes, you are correct. Azerbaijan has joined to CCAC and also joined the Global Methane Pledge this year. So it also shows our dedication to the reducing of global greenhouse gases through addressing the methane. And there are, as already mentioned, there are several sectors that with the high methane intensity, and one of them is the waste sector. And we believe that our initiative that we put forward on the reducing methane from the organic waste is the kind of complement to the global methane pledge, and we by this we will address the specific sector in this pledge, focusing on the waste management. Azerbaijan has a national strategy on waste management where we are planning to the shift from the regional to the regional waste management strategy, and also we are currently building the infrastructure and all these things to reduce the impact of the waste management. And in Baku we have the very let's say modern system of waste management, and we have the waste to energy plant where we produce actually the electricity, and we are doing the sorting, and we are doing the separate collection and etc. So by this our strategy we will expand this our practice in the regions, and we understand also that from the reports of UNEP and the other source that the waste sector is one of the issue is growing because the a number of the waste generated, and also the problems in the food waste, waste loss, and etc. It also bring the the point is the finance visit. So the finance requirement for management of this increasing waste will be about doubled by the 2050. So the declaration and our initiative is to address this issue, and we have the 5 main enabling areas, and one of them is of course the stepping the finance, and also the have the specific attention in the upcoming indices on the waste sector and reduce the methane in this sector, and also support the parties in the provision of the data, because data is very important for the transparency and addressing the data-driven the policies, and also capacity building and integrating all these issues in the national and regional policies, so that we believe that we have already some signatories, or more than 20 countries already joined this to this initiative, and together with support of the UNEP and CCAC, we have built this the initiative, and we hope that this will also build momentum on this issue waste sector.
So that's interesting. I mean, we know that if food waste and food loss was a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Quite a lot of that being methane, I presume. So it's a really important topic. And just let me ask you, when you say regionally, you mean the governments, the countries around Azerbaijan as a regional initiative? Is that the thinking when you say a regional thing? Does it mean you're working with other countries in the region on this?
Our initiative is a global initiative. We call
yes.
all the countries to join this initiative.
Yeah.
But in our national strategy, we would like to shift actually from the district management of the waste to the regional management, to decrease the number of for example, 50, 60 landfills to 8 regional landfills. This also will support our initiative to reduce the methane and waste management.
Okay. Martina, you're moving your hand there.
Exactly, I'm moving my hand because I'd love to get into that topic as well, because there are regional elements to that as well. Latin America, for example, there's a movement there. They would like to close dump sites, for example, and there's a real push for this. So there's regional leadership, and that's very exciting. And what makes me really, really thrilled about this declaration is that it takes us out of the space of capturing the problem at the end, when it has occurred already, when we look at methane capture from landfills, which is obviously something what we must do, because we can't let this resource escape and fuel climate change. But we have to do all the different steps beforehand. There's opportunities. You mentioned food waste. So why don't we feed people but feed climate change? Why don't we use some of the residues that could actually be turned into a useful product and thereby become circular economy? Why don't we look at some of the solutions that nature provide us to turn waste into protein, for example, and thereby revalorize? And that's really exciting that this initiative is actually taking all these upfront steps as well. So I think this is pretty cool.
So it sounds like, so we're hoping at the end of the COP we will get a declaration on this backed by as many countries as possible, and that would be a good win for Azerbaijan here at COP29. Yeah,
we hope so. And we will have the launch event on 19th of November, where we will officially launch this initiative, and we hope that we will have the interest.
Great. So stay with us, because we're going to just dig a little bit deeper. But I just wanted to ask Ingmar Renshog, who is the CEO of We Don't Have Time, and also now a passionate convert to the methane story. And Ingmar, come and join us on, because we're going to have a little chat also with our dear friends back in the World Bank. We don't forget you. I know it's difficult when you're on Zoom and we're live in the studio, but we haven't forgotten you, so please stay with us if you can. So good. As I said, so Ingmar Renshog, founder of We Don't Have Time, now a passionate advocate as of, a few weeks ago, I think it was, on the methane story, which is why we're doing so much on it. What do you think about that, Martina?
Fantastic. Welcome to the crowd. We have been working on this for the past decade and plus. So, but it's a really important topic, and we've taken it from a methane moment to momentum, and now to a movement. And we look forward that this actually helps build.
So
the
you've been
movement
working on it for 12 years, and he's just heard about it. What's going on here? What do you say, Ingmar?
Actually, what opened my mind about this were actually when I watched another previous episode on We Don't Have Time, I understood that methane and other short-lived climate gases is not just another problem we need to solve, it's actually a solution that will give us more time to solve everything else. So the time aspect is very important. Previously, when I heard about methane, and kind of the narrative about methane is that it's a stronger climate gas, that 86 times stronger than carbon dioxide. That's true, but what's the interesting part is the short-lived. We don't need to remove it from the atmosphere because it's only up there for a couple of years. If we stop emitting it, we will actually reverse global warming, not completely, but enough to give us more time to do everything else.
Okay. Good. All right. Let's have a little chat about this. Let's just dig in a little bit deeper with all our wonderful guests, including in the World Bank. Okay, there's a lot of promises right now. There's a lot of promises everywhere. Everybody wants to do something. There's obviously momentum on the methane story, and that's really fantastic. But how do we ensure that the pledges not maybe have teeth, but kind of, work in a sense? How can we, there are big sectors of the economy out there who are part of this story. Agriculture is a huge sector. Oil and gas industry is a huge sector. Waste, I suppose, is a huge sector too. I've never really thought about it. And you even mentioned coal mining, which goes under the radar, right? These are huge parts of the global industry. Do you get the sense, and this is an open question to anybody here, that, for example, these sectors of the economy finally get that they can be part of something good and they want to act? Anybody want to answer this question? Do you get the sense that the sectors are on board with real action now? Stefania?
Nick, yes, because as is being said, climate change is affecting everybody. For instance, the farmers, they know very well that they have to do things different. Cities, which are responsible for managing waste, they know they have to do things different. There is no way of business as usual. And again, as we are saying, methane is going back to the notion of triple wins. When you think is about good development, everything you do to lower methane makes life and the economy better. You strengthen. For instance, in our experience, let me go back to the example of rice. When we were working in Vietnam, we support 1 million farmers, and these are very smallholder farmers. They own less than 2 hectares. And when we help them to adopt low methane practices, for instance, a little drying their fields because what emits methane is the rotting of matter in the pads, they were able to increase in about 45% the yields, and with that their income. So now, for instance, the government of Vietnam has adopted this test case of working in 200,000 hectares, and they are upscaled this across between 1 to 3 million hectares in the Mekong area, where it's the main producer of rice, and the rice is the white gold in Vietnam, which is the main source of the economy. So governments, they understand that. So, but what we need to do is to work at scale. We have done the pilots, we have done the small little work. We needed to come together. For instance, we work as the World Bank, we are working with CCAC. They are a big scientific partner for us. We are working with Marcelo and the philanthropics to support us to upscale. So we are coming, all of us together, playing by our strengths and work at scale. And my final point here is, for instance, looking at CH4D, when we look at livestock, we are working now with 12 countries, 4 of each, which is China, India, Brazil, 3 of each, sorry, China, India, Brazil. They account for 66% of the cattle population in the world. When we work on rice, we are working with the 4 countries that account for 65% of the rice production and consumption. So we are working big scale, and that's what we need. And for that, we need to come together more and more and stop the fragmentation, joining forces and building on the strengths. of
Right.
each all of us. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. We'll come to another person in a second. I just want to inform the guests here that you may see another person on the right-hand screen, but he's actually not part of this show, so the audience doesn't see him. But it's a new technology, so I just want to reassure you that he's in Sweden, he's on next after this show. So, is there anybody else who wants to respond to that? Yes, okay.
Yeah, same goes with what Stefania was saying. I used to be environment minister for Chile, and I had landfills catching fire. The tools of satellite monitoring that allow you to see where the methane emissions are, allow you to see and predict where the fires are going to exist. Mm-hmm. But also, I had communities complaining about foul odors nearby the landfills. And so you could show that the interventions that you have had reduce emissions, but also reduce the foul odors. So there's a local benefit. And we've been able to work with cities like Mumbai or Delhi, or Sao Paulo or Santiago, that have the same objective. Also, when you divert organic waste from a landfill, you extend the life of landfills, which are all ending, right? Mm-hmm. So people don't know where to put the trash. Mm. So when instead of dumping it, organic waste, it's a resource in a landfill that will either cause methane or cause fire, you actually generate things that could help us fight desertification, for example, with composting and soil enhancements that are very positive. So that's a solution you're bringing to people that are actually spending more and more time and money in landfilling further and further away. In Chile, there's cities that actually some of the trash goes 700 kilometers. So if you're able to provide a solution that's local, it's a solution that governments can rally around, usually underfunded. In the case of agriculture, when we're talking with our friends from Danone that have a productivity problem in Morocco, that animals don't produce enough milk, when we come in and help farmers have better feeding formulations that actually allow them to increase yield 3 to 4 times, it leaves more income for farmers. It leaves the opportunity for that livestock producer, for the family to continue that and not have to migrate to a city and with all the problems that we see with this unplanned migration. So there's very big benefits. And the final one is the energy sector. And here we'll have a carrot that's big enough to be a stick, which is the concept of the European Union has established a standard that they will not let other big leaking sources of oil and gas be introduced to that market. If you want to access that market, you need to reduce emissions. And so that's why the US, Canada, and Australia are supporting this work. That's why Korea and Japan also want this approach. If we're able to crack this with this approach, we could cover 70% of all global oil and gas production, potentially having a mandate, because it's a market mandate. If you want to access this market, you need to reduce emissions. But also, you can save money but while doing so.
So you've actually stolen one of my key questions I was going to ask later, which was about regulation. But Martina, go.
I'm happy to come in on regulation. And the thing is, I mean, we talked about the fossil fuel sector and, that there's a big difference between the private sector and the national oil companies, and in terms of means as well. And
you mean the private oil companies and the state-owned?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And here the IEA put out a number that doing everything we need in terms of reducing leakage, venting and flaring to reduce methane in that sector would cost as much as 2% of what the industry made in 2022.
That was $4 trillion US.
Exactly. And that is a pretty amazing number. And why is it not done? And we do say all these measures are actually negative cost, which means profit in the end. But the problem is you can make more profit if you drill for new oil fields, for example. And obviously a company is after return on investment, so it's a logical company decision. So that's where the regulation comes in. We need to do more on that, and here we help, we support countries with their own legislation. That's one. So in some cases we need that. Landfill regulation. There's a whole movement at the moment as well. It's one of the sectors as well for your 5 buckets in the declaration. One is actually on regulation. So there is something as well to divert
Organic waste
the
away
organic
from
waste
the landfill.
from the
yeah.
landfills.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then the other part is, and Marcelo painted a really good picture on that already, what is in it for the people who have to act? So what is in it for the farmer? So productivity gains. So there's a number of those examples. But there's also an adaptation measure. For example, rice fields. If we use the technique is alternate wet and drying, so that we don't consistently flood the fields, which then leads to the methane emissions. That's a water measure, water saving measure, which can be an adaptation measure to more droughts. So
Good point.
looking at-
Anybody? I mean, and I just say with regulation. I mean, people. I'm old enough to remember when you didn't wear seatbelts in cars, right? And when they brought seatbelts in, everybody in Britain went, that's no fun anymore. It's more fun wearing the seatbelt. But the regulation came in, and nobody even thinks about it now. It's just what you do, right? Peg, you come in there, and then I'll ask Ingmar to come in.
Yeah, I just want to say example from our case. For example, our state oil and gas company SOCAR last year at COP28 joined to the oil and gas decarbonization charter with the goal to reduce the methane by near zero by 2035 and reach the net zero in all operations by 2050 and prepare the decarbonization pathway and roadmap to reach. And also just recently they have joined to the UNEP's OGMP, oil and gas methane pledge, which also brings the regulations and reporting, the standards and etc. So that I think that this is also some showcase of dedication to reach these goals. And both the ministry and also I just recently heard that this state oil company also joined this IMEO, it's the International Methane Emission Observatory.
Yeah.
We receive this notification each time they detect any leakage, and this also received by the company, and we address to this if as a such case how they address this leakage if there. So that I think all of this collaboration and exchange of the information, data and experience will build around will help the countries to address this methane emission from different sectors.
So it's alerts to a leakage in real time, which is amazing if you think about it, right?
The Central
Yeah.
5P from the European Space Agency has that, and so the
Yeah,
response assist works, and there's multiple other satellites that are on board that have actually very high capacity and they are transparent, and so therefore we will see the emissions regardless of reporting or not.
Ingmar, you wanted to come in.
I wanted to reflect on the two questions. Do the sectors know about this? Are they working on it and the regulation? And I can just give an example. In Sweden, we don't have any fossil fuel extracting industry. We have already taken care of methane in our waste. We hardly have any methane emission from waste at all. But we have agriculture sector. And I was speaking on a panel with the whole agriculture sector in Sweden, the whole food, biggest food chains, dairy, all the sector were present in the room. And not a single person in that audience know about the methane pledge. That Sweden has signed the methane pledge to reduce 40% methane. They didn't even know about it. How will a sector that don't know about the pledge going to fulfill that pledge? We need regulation, and what BuyMoreTime is advocating for is not just talking about that it's important. We actually need something similar like the Montreal Protocol. We stopped release freons and the ozone layer is now healing. We need something similar, and we don't need 200 countries to start with. The Montreal Protocol were only 46 countries and some industry players and some finance, and that made it happen. We can do something similar here. Maybe something for Azerbaijan to kind of kick off here at COP.
It's a thought. It's a thought. I'm very conscious of Zubin here on Zoom. Zubin, you haven't spoken because you can't kind of grab my attention. Do you have any more thoughts on this accountability? Are people now playing the game that they need to play? Because it's the last game was Russian roulette. We want another game, right?
Yeah, I think some interesting points and good points were made earlier, Nick, and that's why I kind of let the others speak a little bit more. Well, here's the thing on regulation, absolutely. This is what we consider foundational type of work. It levels the playing field and ensures that all operators in a country abide by the same rules when it comes to flaring and methane. Now, this is an emerging part as well. There are many countries that produce oil and gas that don't even have basic regulatory frameworks and policies. And so this is something that we strongly advocate for. And again, the regulation is good. Some countries even have regulation, but then it's not adequately enforced. And the penalties for, say, flaring are not material enough to incentivize the operators to actually do something rather than continuing to flare the gas and allow the methane to leak out. So there has to be an economic case to be made in the regulations that incentivizes these operators to stop flaring and methane. And then the other question about are people doing enough about methane? And the answer is yes. There are many operators and governments doing something about it now. Perhaps some of this delay can be attributed to the fact that until recent years, we weren't able to detect the methane, right? As was said earlier, it's just in the last several years where the technologies for satellite monitoring and other ways of monitoring methane emissions have come on board with a high degree of confidence and ability to detect these methanes. So now that this is coming on board, hopefully we're going to see some of these operators and governments accelerate their efforts and put their plans in place. Because certainly when it comes to flaring, you can start working on something now, but it takes a long time to actually implement these projects because it requires sometimes infrastructure and a variety of other things, of course, getting the financing in place as well. So these are some of the challenges we're seeing and why many of the emerging economies around the world need this kind of support and help. Often when we meet with a government agency, the first thing they say to us is, boy, there's a lot of technologies out there. There's a lot of associations, industry organizations, civil society that have been coming to us and asking us to do something and join this initiative and that pledge. And it's all very confusing to us. So could you please try and help us make sense of it? What are the first few things we should be doing to address our flaring and methane emissions? And that's why it's really important, as was said earlier by a couple of my fellow panelists and speakers, that it really requires coordination amongst all of these industry organizations, civil society, governments, the private sector, the financiers, the banks. It requires a lot of coordination, and we like to play a little bit of this coordinating role at the World Bank. As you know, we are a convening power, and this is some of the work that we'd like to do. Thanks.
Good. We've only got about 10 more minutes, or maybe even less actually, but there's a little clicker there you can see counting us down, and I promise you a rocket will not go off in the studio. If it does, we better run very fast, but that's what we've got left. Let's try and look forward rather than where we are. What do you, and this is to everybody, what has to happen next, right? So we're on a launch path to something maybe pretty good, not least because we don't have time, but we're on a launch path to something pretty good. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen in the next 12 months? What's going to happen up to 2030? Can we, if we put our shoulders against the wheel, have a chance of halving global greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 if we act on methane and maybe some of the other super pollutants with the CO2 as well, of course? What's going to happen next year and the year after? Is there a journey, a road plan? Is it just money? Is it more policy? Is it regulation? What do we need now? Yeah? Who wants to jump in on this? Thank you.
So you're talking about the fact that mitigating methane and other short-lived pollutants is the fastest way to reduce temperature in the short term. We're nearing the 1.5 degree threshold, if not surpassing it. The only way we will reduce temperature within our lifetimes is focusing on short-lived climate mitigation now. So what I hope will happen at COP30, a major emitter of methane too, is seizing on the opportunities, but also presenting this as a great opportunity to pull an emergency brake on climate change, rising temperatures, having a focus, a protocol specific on short-lived climate pollutants. We could reduce in total 0.5 degrees, 0.3 from methane, and bring local benefits. In the case of Brazil, improve productivity for farmers, higher resilience in the production of rice, lower emissions from landfills that are having problems and causing conflict, environmental conflict. And so I think it is aligned. Brazil is interested, China has the target, the EU is standing strong with the global methane pledge, and 158 countries are still in this. So I do believe that there is merit to this, because when you mitigate methane and other short-lived climate pollutants, the benefits stay where action is taken. It dissipates the question, why should I act when it's not the big emitters? Because you do get local benefits that actually bring development benefits that we are so hard to find.
I just want to say one thing that's really interesting. Before we came to the COP, some of my friends back home were saying, oh God, the world's going to hell, there's war everywhere, everything's, the guide rules of how we were supposed to be organizing the world are falling apart. And I said, yeah, but it's interesting, right? Even when things are going bad, China and the USA are still on climate change cooperating. I don't know whether that will last, but anyway, we don't need to go into that. But, the world is still cooperating on climate change despite what's going on in the world right now.
2 days after the election, China submitted for the first time a methane target. They
Yeah.
don't do things by coincidence. It's a
They
commitment.
don't just do that for propaganda reasons. They do it because they really mean it, right? Anybody else from the World Bank? What's next? What do we need? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I could come
Well,
in.
Zubin, no, I'm going to have Stefania, only for gender balance.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. The first thing we are doing is we are now upscaling. We are mainstreaming methane abatement across our entire portfolio. So Zubin is working about 12 countries on energy, and we are working in 24. Now the order is to mainstream completely across our portfolio. That's one. There are other things we are doing as well, and I just want to throw one point here that I think is important we haven't mentioned, and it goes back to regulation, which is subsidies, perverse incentives. There is about $600 billion annually being spent on perverse subsidies that are leading our farmers, for instance, to use synthetic fertilizer that is giving taxpayer to industries linked to fossil fuels. This is a very this is a low-hanging fruit. It's hard to work on incentives, but the money is out there. And that's something when we talk about regulation is also talk about what are the existing policies and how can we change it. And there are plenty of governments out there which want to change these regulations. You were talking about China, for instance. Our methane portfolio, we are working on rice, livestock, and waste. It's all informing the new pollution control national policy of China. And many of the 24 countries, 23 countries are using the portfolio, it's financed by the World Bank, to come up with very tangible and ambitious NDC targets on methane. So I just want to throw here that there are many, it's from farmer to governments. There is a lot of movement, a lot of interest. It's perhaps just a question of giving a name, as Marcelo and Igmar was saying, to the short pollutants. But the movement is out there, but we need to keep focused, Nick.
Okay.
We cannot divert and do 100 things. We need to do one. And the year now, until 2030, is short pollutants.
Okay. Stefania, Zubin, very briefly now, because we've got 4.5 minutes left.
Sure. So I suppose to answer your question, Nick, it's all of the above, right? As is often the case. So we need to improve regulation and focus on what seems to be working and incentivizing operators. We need to work on the financing side of methane, which again is an emerging side of things. We also still need to see the technology evolve and improve whether it's detection or otherwise. So we got to work on all of these fronts, and that's why, again, it requires a lot of coordination amongst all of us, hoping to achieve some dramatic emissions reductions over the coming years. Now, with our trust fund, what we hope to say over the next year or so is do more projects with some of these governments and operators. For example, we have one project in a country that makes a strong economic case. It's not just the climate angle, it's the economic case, which is if you stop flaring, if you plug these leaks of methane, you actually have a financial return in many cases. And that money that you receive by addressing your emissions can be put back into a fund that is programmatic, long-term approach to methane reduction. So you continuously use that money to continue to plug your leaks and address your flaring and methane emissions. There are solutions like this.
You brought the word sustainable finance in there. It goes back into a pod and it keeps going round.
Yep, somewhat sustainable, exactly.
Okay,
Thanks.
super. Thank you very much. So, 4 guests here, not much time. Who wants to, we're going to start wrapping up here, but one question I have is, the finance that's all being spent on methane right now, and obviously it needs to be more in the pot, does that contribute to the COPs? Does that contribute to climate finance when people start calculating the numbers?
Yes, it does, but it's also important to say only 2% of all climate finance today is going to methane.
Right.
It's 50% of the warming, 2% of the funding.
Right.
So that's why we're working with groups like the World Bank and the IDB and others to increase that substantially.
Yes. Okay. From the point of view of Azerbaijan, you'll be now going forward with all these various plans, including on the oil and gas industry. There seems to be a roadmap, and that's very positive indeed. Can you persuade others to join, as it were? Can you persuade other oil and gas state companies or whatever to join in this effort?
Yes. I think that this global methane pledge that the countries already joined showcases that how the parties approach to this. I would like to touch the other sector, the agriculture. I think it's also very important, the sector which carries a lot of social burden, not only in Azerbaijan, I think all over the world. And we also plan and started engagement with CCAC to look at the development of the specific roadmap to reduce the methane flow from the agriculture sector, because we need to here be very careful when we introducing the subsidies and also the support, so that we have this shift very smooth, not compromising the agriculture development, and also to reduce the methane from this sector. In other sectors, of course, I already said that Azerbaijan is dedicated to reduce methane emission from the oil and gas and our state company, and hopefully that the other countries will also be such dedicated in this process. And also for the waste sector, we have a national strategy. We would like to build on it and enhance this this strategy all over the country. And I think that Mr. Martina said a very important point here, that our ultimate goal not to bring all the waste to the landfill and then generate something. One of our goals that we pursue is to make from the waste and contribute to the circular economy. That actually in the heart of our strategy on waste management.
So the message I've got out of this is that we have a huge opportunity to make a big dent in global warming, maybe even meet the dream of halving emissions by 2030 and keeping 1.5 degrees centigrade alive if we get aggressive as a global community on methane. And also I hear that we need more money for this endeavor, particularly in the developing countries. But then there are ways of actually making money out of this as well. So it's about economics as well. And it's about how you clearly glimpse economics. Because if you priced in the cost of killing the planet from climate change, then everything that we're talking about right now would be instantly financed because there'd be no other place to do it, right? So, I mean, it's a question of how you actually view the global economics and green economics and what works in favor. Ingmar, you want to make a brief question because we're over time. Yeah.
So we don't have time. I'm used to that. I will say that I think we need to put money to the table, and those that are working on limiting methane emission, we should not penalize them. We should pay them, but someone needs to pay. And there is an industry out there, the oil, coal and gas industry. They actually make a lot of money, and as you told, they just need a fraction of that profit to pay for it. So I think it's in their interest too. I mean, oil and gas also want to have a future, right? So let's get the money to the table, funnel it into those that are limiting the emission, including oil and gas itself, of course. So an oil company not limiting emissions should pay to an oil company limiting the emission.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to close it down there. I'm sorry, Martina, and everybody else. I'm sure we could all talk for another 10 days on this. Well, that's what they do at COPs. They talk for more than 10 days. But we can't because we've got some other wonderful guests coming in from Stockholm on other topics to do with climate change. Thank you so much for being with us. I think that was really interesting. We're doing a daily show on methane. Please tune in. It's every day at 15:30. Baku, a local time, just for 30 minutes. This was an hour because it was the first show. Thanks to the Climate and Clean Air Coalition for your support, and bye-bye for the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we are. I thought it was getting serious, but then he posted this story like 5 minutes ago.
Weird.
That's so toxic. Like, who is she? Is she one of his friends? He's never mentioned her. Who is she?
I don't feel so good.
This was the guy we talked to on the phone the other day, you know? We didn't even recognize it, did we? Great. Sorry, we were chatting away in the studio. We just had a really exciting session about methane, and now we're coming to another exciting session. So this is about solar heated carbon removal, and it's a massive opportunity. So when we're talking about how to decarbonize our energy systems, most people probably think about electricity and the need to make it fossil fuel free. And this, of course, is very important. But the largest source for emissions of many industries around the world is heating. And this is especially relevant for the growing industry of carbon removal from the atmosphere. In this session, we'll talk about a very interesting solution to tackle this problem. And let's do that by having our first guest come in on the magic of Zoom from Sweden. That's Joachim Byström, who's the CEO of Absolut. Do you know, I can't say it. Just say it for us.
Yes, Absolut.
I can't do it. Okay, we've got it. Thank you very much. Solar Collector AB. Welcome, Joachim. Please tell us about your company and what makes this solution so special.
Yes, and first I can correct you. It's not only industry that uses a lot of heat. The whole society uses a lot of heat. So if you see at the final consumption of energy in society, it's only 20% that is electricity. 30% is transport, and 50% is heat. Basically burning fossil fuel to heat the buildings, hot water, or industrial processes. But as you said, the majority of the discussion is on electricity and transport, and very little is discussed about heat. So this is one of our missions here for Absolicon, to talk about heat and tell everyone that heat is half, and we need to address this challenge. That is why I have this heat is half badge that we try to spread around the world. And the way that Absolicon can handle this challenge with heat is by making heat directly from the sun with concentrated solar collectors. And we have actually built the world's best parabolic solar collector that follow the sun during the day and focus the light to produce 160-degree hot steam or pressurized hot water. So this is basically working as a magnifying glass, focusing on the light, all the light on this narrow black pipe that you can see in the center of the solar collector. And the whole system is protected with a hardened low iron glass that is self-cleaning. So this kind of field that you see here on the picture, it provides then steam to power a packaging machine at Birra Peroni in Bari in southern Italy, making beer. And this is what we see, that most of the food and beverage industry, they need those kind of heat generating solar thermal fields. And we work with 15 of the 25 largest multinationals in the world to discuss and introduce this technology to them. But what Absolicon said is actually not this fantastic product that produces heat and steam. It is the robotized production line that we build together with ABB, because the need of this kind of heat solutions is so big. So once it takes off, then you need to make hundreds of thousands or millions of square meters of solar collectors in a specific area. And for that, you need a robotized mass production. So Absolicon's core competence is to build those together with ABB and Siemens, set them up around the world to produce the enormous amount of parabolic troughs that are needed to make the heat for the industry and the transport. And we are the only company in the world that has this vision and this concept for mass producing locally small parabolic troughs that can replace heat and steam in different sectors. And those sectors, we focus on food and beverage and chemistry and petrochemical and desalination and a lot of industries. But we just recently found out that this very important industry with carbon removal is also a big heat consumer. And if we look at the challenge that we have here, the IPCC say that we need to have net zero emissions by 2050. And today we are at 40 gigatons. So what we need to do is to follow the carbon law and reduce the emission by half every decade. So we go for 40 to 20 to 10 to 5. But 5 gigaton is still not zero. So just by reducing the CO2 emissions, we will never be able to make the targets. But then we have the blue line, where we actually can take CO2 from the atmosphere, find it up there, and put it back into the ground again, so that our children and grandchildren can clean out the atmosphere that we have polluted. But the problem is that this CO2 removal process is also requiring a lot of energy. And that is then where our solar collectors come in. Because this solar collector we have developed have very, very low CO2 emissions when you build them. If you would build large wind power or PV fields, you get a lot of CO2 emission just by building the fields. But our solar collectors are just glass and steel, and we just have 8 grams per kilowatt hour of energy produced. So that is our unique selling point to the carbon removal industry.
Super, indeed. Joachim, it's very interesting indeed. And you're absolutely right. The whole story of heat is so far under the radar in so many economies about the waste of heat, right? It just needs to be turned on its head. We're wasting gigawatts of energy all over the place, if not something bigger than that. We know that many companies, Joachim, are greening their electricity consumption, but what are they doing about heat? Are you seeing companies rising to this challenge of harnessing the heat?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if you look at the big multinationals like Coca-Cola or Unilever, you can see that they rapidly have reduced their CO2 emissions. But when you dig into the data and see the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, you see that all of the reduction comes from buying clean electricity instead of buying the dirty electricity from the coal power plants. So everyone that are succeeding in CO2 reduction today are doing that by buying wind and PV electricity. And basically nothing has been done to the heat yet.
Right.
So all those multinationals, it's only Heineken that had seriously started to decarbonize heat. Everyone else is still only looking at electricity.
That's super, Joachim. Let's bring on some more guests now. That puts it into context. So we've got here with us some more guests, and we would like to have a little bumper just to move on to this next segment. So, with us we now have Tom Buchanan, Strategic Partnerships Manager at Climeworks. He's coming in through the magic of Zoom from some wonderful part of the world into Baku. And then we've got Ingmar Rentzhog, who's the CEO and founder of We Do Have Time, who's here with us in the studio. And we also have Joachim, who we just met on the magic of Zoom, with us too. Tom, I'm going to address you first. For those who do not yet know what ClimeWorks is and what you do, can you tell us?
There we go. Sorry, just needed to unmute myself there. Good to see you, Nick.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to have found out that in spite of the fact that I'm in a terrible apartment here in Baku and my shower isn't working, that the lack of heat in my shower is actually making my trip here somewhat more sustainable. What is ClimeWorks? ClimeWorks is the world leader in carbon removal. We are most famous for our proprietary direct air capture technology that many people know as those giant machines that they've seen out in Iceland. CNBC was out a couple of months ago and they described it perfectly for their American audience, which was giant vacuum cleaners for the sky that suck in ambient air, capture the carbon from that air on a filter. When the filter is full, the vent closes. Then we heat up the filter with some with steam to about 100 degrees. The carbon falls off the filter. We then take that carbon and that steamy carbon and inject it deep underground, like a soda stream is how they described it, where it mineralizes with the rock below and stays for tens of thousands of years.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tom. And how could what Joachim and his company are doing with solar heat solutions be relevant in this carbon removal story?
So our aim in everything that we do is to try and make sure that the carbon removal process is as efficient and as low emission as possible. And a key part of that is ensuring that we have a cheap and low carbon supply of heat. That's got an incredibly important role, not just in the future of so many industries, but also in what we do with direct air capture. At the moment, our two biggest facilities are in Iceland, and we can use waste geothermal heat to produce the steam that we need to extract the carbon from our filters. As we expand around the world, and we've been backed by the US government to develop a facility in Louisiana, which will eventually be capable of extracting 1 million tons of carbon per year, we're going to need to find different ways of accessing the heat that we need. And what Joachim's got is a perfect example of that.
Super. Okay, Ingmar, We Don't Have Time has published hard over the years, worked very hard to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. And now we're also looking very hard at how to get rid of the so-called super pollutants. From your perspective, is carbon removal a solution? And if so, why?
I think absolutely. But the way I see it, we need to focus on we need to focus on everything. But what's most important to get more time here and now is to stop emitting those short pollutants, because you don't need to remove short-lived climate gases. You just need to stop emit them. But that will not be enough, because the carbon dioxide we put up in the atmosphere right now will stay there for up to thousands of years. So we must remove it, and we can't do that without carbon removal. But it's kind of stupid to increase the carbon dioxide emission, and some magically believe that we will remove them more when we increase. We will not be able to do that. So we need to reduce the emissions and remove what we have already put up there. So we need to do everything, basically. And carbon removal must work. Otherwise, we will only buy us time, but we will not solve the climate crisis long term. So what Climeworks are doing is maybe not what's going to help us this decade, but it will help us in the future. And if we don't start now, it will be too late.
And if we don't start now on these kinds of technologies, we need to start to bring the cost down, don't we? I mean, there needs to be some scaling to bring costs down.
I mean, carbon removal, I don't think it will be that high volume this decade, but we need to start it now in order to scale it, bring the costs down and make it work. And therefore, pioneers like Climeworks, without them, we will be nowhere on carbon removal. And not only Climeworks, there's some others there too, of course. So, but we need to crack the code for this. Carbon removal is not a magic bullet, but it's a bullet we need to use.
Joachim, what is the potential for your solution in the carbon removal industry? How does it fit in?
If we take Climeworks as an example, for them to remove a million ton of CO2 every year, they need a lot of energy, but that our solar collectors can provide. So to remove 1 ton of CO2 from the atmosphere, you are actually good with 1 square meter of our parabolic trough. It captures 76% of the incoming sunlight and convert it into heat. And when then heat is used in Climeworks machinery, it captures 1 ton of CO2. So for this plant that is going to remove 1 million ton of CO2, you need 1 million square meters of solar collectors. And of course, if it would take 1 million tons to produce them, that it would never pay off. But we can make this solar field as it's just glass and metal with very, very small CO2 emissions. And what we see is then at this site where they need 1 million square meters of solar collectors, we will set up a production plant that produce the solar collectors just next to where they are needed. So there are no unnecessary transports of the solar collectors. They will just be produced by the robots and put into the field. And for the production line that we have today, that we have sold to Canada and Egypt and is now delivering, that production line produces 100,000 square meters of solar collectors every year. So for this kind of plant we are talking about, that we need 1 million square meters, it's actually 10 years of production in the production line. So we would need to set up several production lines to fulfill the energy need of that kind of plant that would capture 1 million tons per year.
Okay. Let's have us all together here. We've got like 13 minutes or something to chat among ourselves. Okay, and I think this is really, what are the biggest opportunities and what are the biggest hurdles in scaling this solution is the question I have in my script. I don't know which solution we're talking about, Joachim's or Tom's, but maybe both. So what are the biggest challenges, Tom, you face right now? And what are the biggest opportunities as well, Tom, yeah?
I mean, I think we probably face the same problems, and most people who have similar climate solutions are facing the same problems at the moment, which is we need a lot of money, and we need a lot of money now. and getting people to act now as opposed to acting, for us in particular, when somebody says they have a 2030 net zero goal or they have a 2040 net zero goal, they often come to us and they say, so why should we be buying this now as opposed to in 2029 or in 2039 in some cases? And fundamentally, it is because we need to scale this up, as Ingmar said, we need to bring the costs down. And we also do need to have an impact in this decade, because without various carbon removal solutions, including the one that we offer, we're going to hit a number of tipping points, and we want to slow our progress towards those. Otherwise, it will be rather disastrous.
Yes, and we have similar problems that we talk with this food and beverage industry, and they all have the targets to get to zero CO2 emissions, but they are dragging their feet to order the solar fields from us and to start the procurement process to change the working of their factories. So it's too slow and too little.
It's interesting. I mean, let's talk maybe about the EU's emission trading scheme, but I'll just share with you out of interest, we have these shows on methane, and a lot of methane comes out of coal, right? And it's just vented into the atmosphere. But in Australia, and we're going to have somebody on the show from Australia and Britain later on in the week, it's really going gangbang to actually get the investment to actually deal with these methane links from the Australian coal mines, because they put a price on carbon in Australia, which is maybe not as big as Climeworks needs, but it's still penalizing enough that the coal mining industry wants to get rid of the methane. So, a price on carbon or an emissions trading scheme of the right magnitude, surely this is something that could work for both camps here, right?
Well, what the EU has done with the new emission trading system is that in the past, the emission trading system in the EU has only been for electricity production and large industry. But the new system that was decided in 2023, it is for all the small boilers. So that new system is for heat and transport. And it is setting the starting point at 2024, and then it's cutting the emission rights by 5% every year. So if you want to be in pace with this system, you need to remove 5% of your CO2 emissions every year, because there will not be enough emission rights otherwise. And we expect the price of those emission rights to increase the natural gas price in Europe with 50%.
Tom, I mean, emissions trading schemes, could they be good for you? Could they provide some of the finance?
I think that putting a price on carbon is a fantastic idea if it is feasible. I used to do a lot of work with various UN organizations. Carbon pricing kept me up late at night on many occasions. It's an incredibly complex area, and something that will take a lot of time to get right and to get some level of consensus on. It's why now we're seeing more and more pioneering companies set internal carbon prices. And the better ones of those, Swiss Re, Microsoft, they're looking at doing, as an example, $100 a ton in this decade, and then shifting it up to $200 a ton between 2030 and 2035, and then reviewing it in 2035 and going up from there. And then they're left to consider reports like one we had earlier this year, which is what is the social cost of carbon. And there was a report in February that said it was already well above $1,100 a ton. So I think getting agreement on what that cost should be will be very difficult to do. So getting the private sector to act in the way those organizations have is always inspiring, and hopefully encourages more action.
Unfortunately, I can chip in that.
Joachim, just 1 second. Joachim, hold on just 1 second. We'll come to you. Ingmar, you wanted to say something?
Actually, I just listened, but I mean, what we need to do here is we need to scale carbon removal technology. We need to funnel the money. It will be expensive today, but if no one pays when it's expensive, it will never get cheap. Just look at solar. It was super expensive. It was a space technology. Now it's soon the cheapest energy source on the planet, and soon the most common energy source. So the same thing needs to happen with carbon removal, but it's just one thing that we need to be very aware of, and that is we need to not eat up all the energy we produce to remove the carbon. Yes, carbon removal will need to use a lot of energy, and we must make sure that it's clean energy and it's the most efficient energy. We will need electricity for everything. So if we can use solar heat for carbon removal energy use, I think that is very important.
And solar heat for so many other things, right?
Of course.
Heat is sort of like also at the center of this story as well, because heat is a thing that can support what Climeworks does, but also heat is at the heart of at the moment, the European economy, and people don't even talk about it that much. And I find this absolutely extraordinary, staggering. So as you say, Joachim, it's all about green energy, which of course we need, right? Electricity. But heat, nobody talks about. It's really bizarre at the level of the policymakers or at the level of the public understanding. Yeah. Sorry, Joachim, we interrupted you there, but go on.
Yes, but I wanted to say that those internal carbon prices, we have yet to see a company that uses the internal carbon price for their investment decision when it comes to changing a factory into solar thermal. For us, what we see is that they just look at what do they pay for natural gas today and how much cheaper will it be in a solar thermal. And even when we show that it's cheaper with solar thermal, they are still hesitant. So there's an enormous potential just to do the investment that is on the table that we have proposed for different industries to turn from burning fossil fuel to use solar thermal.
Coming back to you, Tom, I mean, we have followed a little bit the story of Climeworks, and you know, there are also others I know in this space now looking at devices, if I can put it that way, or systems to capture carbon. But how, we talked about a price on carbon, we talked about carbon markets that could be useful for both of you there, but is there some other way of going? Is there a kind of Elon Musk type figure out there that could just take this thing and drive down the cost, and it would just be one of a group of technologies that are there and ready to use as we need them? You know what I mean? Does it, because it's a dream shot as well in some ways, Tom.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you had looked at what companies like Climeworks are doing today, and you told scientists that we would be doing this in 10 years ago when we started doing it, they would say that sounds pretty bonkers. So that we've got to that is Elon Musky in its own part. But we have to remember that we can't rely on one single solution. Even if one came along that was highly effective, we'd still have to look at a broad portfolio. It's why at Climeworks we now develop full carbon removal portfolios for the organizations that we work with, because in order to reach the scale that we need to get to, and Joachim brought out a slide earlier that said it was about 5 gigatons a year. I have conversations that suggest it might need to be 3 times that, scary conversations that suggest it might need to be 3 times that, which means that we're going to need to scale up a lot of nature-based solutions. We're going to need to scale up a lot of soil-based solutions. There are amazing things like enhanced rock weathering that need to be refined. Biochar, BECCS has a really important role to play. All of these need to be scaled up. All of these need to have their costs brought down, but also people need to understand that it's never going to be cheap or free, because the most effective and best things that exist never are. But cheaper, much cheaper they will all be.
Yeah. Joachim?
I would say that the key element would be cheap financing. If we could have zero interest loans for those investments, not forever, but for a few years when those investments start, to have zero interest loans, that would make a big difference. And also I can say that the advantage of using solar thermal is that you can actually place the carbon removal unit anywhere in the world where there's a lot of sun, like in Arizona or in Sahara or in northern India, where you have fantastic solar radiation. because what we often run into are space constrictions when you come into an area with factories. But here we can actually place the carbon removal unit where there is a lot of solar thermal heat from the sun.
Do you have Tom, do you have a very positive government attitude in Iceland to these kinds of technologies, right? I mean, I know that they've been pumping CO2 into the volcanoes, haven't they? Linked with their, I think, their smelter, aluminium smelter. So, I mean, they've been doing a lot of kind of funky things in Iceland. And do you think they're quite receptive to new ideas? Can I put it that way?
They are funky guys in Iceland. We are a big fan of everything they're doing. I think if it wasn't for the Icelandic government, then we would not have been able to scale up to where we are now. I think that original meeting actually happened at one of the COPs quite a few years ago between our CEO and founder and the Icelandic government that led to our two facilities being there today. So yeah, good on them. I mean, it's amazing that they have this faith in the kind of technologies that can be really game changing for the future. Yeah.
And where next then? What happens after this? You're here at COP29, Tom. You'll be having meetings with people about Climeworks. So just briefly, what are you doing here?
Meeting governments, meeting with various organizations as well to talk to them about their net zero journey and where removals fit into that, helping them come up with the right strategies. We just put out a report actually last week with WBCSD, with some of our partners, as well as the likes of Danone, Majid Al Futtaim, Aul Deleuze, Cisco, about what companies can do to get involved and to help scale up the market for carbon removal today. And why that needs to happen. So I'd advise anybody to check that out, but we'll be sharing more on that over the course of this week.
And Joachim, where'd you go with your, where's next? Have you got another country you're going to put this stuff into?
Well, we are working with those largest food and beverage industries in the world and giving them quotes for different plants. Yeah. And then we are doing offers for companies like Climeworks and other sectors that need very low CO2 emission heat.
Right. So that's the way to go at the moment. Yeah. Super. Well, look, we could always talk for a long time about this. Lots more things to say, but we're running out of time. I want to thank Ingmar for being with us, listening in. He always finds these very interesting and often has some good... Oh, you want to say something? Okay. I knew Ingmar would say something if I turned to him.
I think it's always this discussion about, but if we focus on carbon removal, we will stop doing the reducing the emission. Yeah. If we focus on methane, we are going to stop focusing on carbon dioxide. There's one thing we must focus on, and that's the only thing we must focus on, and that's the time frame and the tipping points. And we will need carbon removal, we will need methane reduction, and we will need nature-based solutions, but we will need to fund those solutions that will scale at the fastest pace. And we also need to fix the heat. It's stupid that we use electricity for heating. So we need to scale all those solutions. It's not either or, it's doing everything, but focus on the time frame. We can't focus on everything, but if we focus on time and efficiency, we will solve the climate crisis. Okay, so we need short-term, medium-term and long-term vision in everything we do in terms of planning for this climate-changed future. Yeah. Okay. Bye, everybody. Been great to see you, and I'm sure we'll see you all again. And Tom, next time, if you're at the COP, come into the studio and do this, and not in some apartment where you can't get the shower working. Okay. Bye. Good. So we are nearing the end of the day here in Baku. This was our first show here from COP29, and will probably be the shortest, because after tomorrow we really crank up the day with a lot more
content. But it's been great to be here. It's been great to be with Ingmar, of course, CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. And also we have a special guest with us, and that's Carl Enroth, a documentary filmmaker with a broad background in sustainability. And we'll come to Carl in a minute. But first, Ingmar, any reflections on the day?
I mean, it's hard to experience COP when you are working on COP. But we have actually a cube in the media zone where we're doing all the preparation work for those broadcasts, and we can follow what's going on in the plenary, etc. And I heard the opening speech from the COP presidency, where he was really mad about fake news media portraying Azerbaijan a way he didn't agree on. It was kind of interesting. I will say we need more news, and we need to get the stories out there. I don't really know if he was right or wrong, but I think that what we do here to bring out the facts, that is so important to do. And it's easy to have an opinion about COP if you're not here.
So what I worry about sometimes, we'll come in a second, Carl, to you, but what I worry sometimes is that some of the powerful, maybe you might say more Western media, sometimes has a certain vision of what a country is like and the people who in it are like and what they think and what their values are without really knowing them. And I'm not trying to say this to say that Azerbaijan is not an oil and gas industry country, and we know that we need to do something very serious about oil and gas in this world if we're going to deal with climate change. But I think, I mean, we had a chap here from the Azerbaijani government earlier in the show. We talked to him. I know the people that invited him onto our show. They're good people from the UN. I mean, now we've heard from him, and he has heard a little bit from us. And maybe there's a way of forming relationships, because the whole UN conferences are about trying to form relationships with people from other countries in the hope and belief that you can move these people into different spaces to what they were possibly in before, right? So it's about relationships building. So again, I'm not trying to greenwash any of this, but I think it's nice to meet people from this country who are working in the government, who give their voice and their perspective to a global audience, and let's see what that means.
Yeah, right? I totally agree. And sometimes criticisms are very well deserved, but I do believe that in order to criticize the host of COP, you need to be here.
Yeah.
It's very, you can't really know how things are working if you're not here. I'm not saying if Azerbaijan will be a good host or bad host. That is to be seen. But I do say that by coming here to Azerbaijan, I get my personal view on this country has changed. Things are so far quite well organized, at least.
And the people are very nice.
Yes.
Carl, great to see you. You're doing some work here for We Don't Have Time as a photojournalist and video journalist. You have a long career in this. Just briefly first, what have you been up to today? What did you see? What did you think? What was it like? Yeah,
I have had the opportunity to just walk around a few hours on the site. And there are, I mean, where other people see people, there's a story. So I've been searching for the stories and just sort of stopping them and going with my camera, taking a photograph, and then try to sort of pick up what they're at and what they're doing. There's so much competent people around, and I really like your idea here that it's all about relations in one sense, and just negotiating my own assumptions about a country or a person, and feel that just by listening and arguing a bit, you will see that, well, we have a lot of common here, and maybe a bit of similarities and dissimilarities, but it's really about it's a really good opportunity to meet a lot of people from all over the world at the same time.
So I think maybe I can just step back and rephrase it. It is about relationships. It always has been, and it always will be in the history of the world. Governments come with many of the big governments come with very clear things they want, but there's always room in between what everyone's told they have to do, and there's always a bit of wiggle room if you have a good relationship with another government or another country or whatever, to actually raise your ambition a little bit within the cracks between the official capital city dictator, this is what you're going to do at this COP, this is what we want in our own national sovereignty. The negotiators have this wiggle room there to make something better out of something that could be worse. And I think that's what goes on in these COPs, yeah.
But it is also an arena, I think. It's not so often that you're licensed to talk to someone. Because in a city, people are in a hurry, they're doing different things. But here, people are just here to listen and learn. And there is a great opportunity to actually try and meet other people who are just waiting for a contact, a memorable moment, and telling the passion.
And as well, there are a new generation of negotiators from governments that never experience what it is to work as a COP. There's a new generation of young people coming through. There's a new generation of private sector people. There's people coming all the time who have never been to a COP. And that is either a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But it does mean that they have to be informed, again, what this whole thing is about. And is it of value as well? Sorry, Ingmar, go.
No, I think we also need to say what we're not talking about. This is maybe the last COP with United States in the room.
Well, that's also true.
And one thing I'm kind of confident on, it will not be the world's loss, it will be the United States loss, because I don't think the other parties in this room will leave this if US will leave the Paris Agreement again. I mean, come on. That's a bad decision, and I believe that maybe it will help us unite even more, because leaving the party will not solve the climate crisis, and that's bad even for Donald Trump.
Well, mentioning the USA and Donald Trump, I saw you'd made some video of an interview with a lady in the Ukraine pavilion. I saw a snippet of that, and it was very moving. The pavilion itself was incredibly designed as well. Tell us about that encounter.
Well, that encounter really made me cry, actually, because it's so close to us in Sweden, and the history and the sort of military aggression. So seeing this, I would say small, it was sort of tiny, but so full of power. And her husband was involved in the front, and she was doing this for the climate as an idea, and still in this environment where it's so brutal, the war, there's still hope. They're still working with these issues. So it's really at the, I think, would say, sort of epicenter of the sort of vulnerable democracy we have, and they're really fighting for it, and they need all the support they can get. And on top of that, there's sort of brilliant, smart, very strong people. And I think also the climate. Another thing that touched me is really that many of these people I met have a personal connection to climate. I talked to a person from Australia, which is not in the film, and he has friends, relatives, and lived in an area which has totally been devastated. So it's not just an idea, something you see on television. It is his family, his friends that are actually influenced or by these wildfires and droughts and floodings. So it's really creeping up. It's not a sort of abstract idea that we can have or have not. It's about our people's lives. It's about sort of survival. And I think that is also something that come across. And if you have the time and just sort of stand and talk to anyone here, there will be a story somewhere that is related to this issue. And I find that both moving and inspiring, and that gives me energy.
It's interesting that humans are really quite extraordinary. There's not many that can actually say, I know this big issue is coming, and therefore we should act in a precautionary way, right, against something terrible that will come in the future. It's amazing how we almost have to completely destroy the edifice and the beauty and everything before we all wake up and go, my God, we better do something right now, which is probably then too late, right? But I mean, how many COPs have you been to now?
5, I think.
5. And does your do you change as you go each time? Do you become a different person after being here or being part
Yes,
of it?
I will say I grow much older because of the intense work schedule. It's not much sleep or food.
Now you know why I look like an old man, yeah?
Exactly. You have been to, how many COP have you been to?
Don't ask. Don't ask.
Almost all, right?
Almost all, yeah.
No, I will say that it's so important that we meet and talk and understand each other. Otherwise, I think it's very hard to cooperate. So COP are important, but it's not the only thing. It's just one thing we need in order to get things happening faster.
Carl, yeah?
Yeah, I'd just like to add on that, and apart from the sort of passionate personal stories, I think what dawned upon me when talking to these people was the conflict of interests. So people are navigating a conflict of interest in their own profession, as we are too, sort of flying here, making it worthwhile to be in Azerbaijan. So learning how to do that only in dialogue with others is a skill that we need to be better at. And I'd like to sort of improve on that also, conflict of interests.
So we're at really just the very beginning of this COP, this Conference of the Parties here in Azerbaijan. But I was noticing there have been some interesting announcements. I know that we can't talk about them all, but so in Glasgow, in COP26, so 3 COPs ago, the governments gave the green light to a new generation of what they call voluntary carbon markets. So that could be investing in trees and paying people with lower incomes in Latin America to maintain their tree with carbon credits, whatever. They've always been a bit controversial, but they gave the go-ahead now. Then there was some questions that still were standing out that didn't mean they could go forward, but then everything I think was agreed at the beginning of this week. So carbon markets are here and they are available, so let's see what the world makes of how they use those. But now, this is now like a proud British person standing here, and I'm not doing that because I'm doing it because it's a good standout number. So the UK Prime Minister was here and they've set a target for an over 80% emission reduction, which in their new National Climate Action Plan, their so-called NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution, and I think that is the front runner right now. So I think that's good news to hear that, you know, this government is prepared to take its responsibilities seriously and has gone way out, and I think it has a chance to meet them. So that's a pretty good target, right? 80% plus 80% emission reduction. Any thoughts?
I think it's obvious because UK lost COP. We had another government in UK doing more what Donald Trump is maybe trying to do. It didn't last. I mean, that government failed before the period was over. So we're up for a ride with Donald Trump, but it will not last.
Well, I remember being in Marrakesh in Morocco in 2017, the year after the Paris Agreement was done. I was still working for the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and that was the year where Donald Trump got elected first time round. And I can tell you, that place was in shock, and it was almost silent. You couldn't hear a pin drop, you could hear whispering everywhere. And no governments wanted to give any interviews to media, nothing. It's very different at this COP.
Yeah.
It's almost like the world
cares?
has just brushed it aside and said, we keep going.
Yeah.
We're over 190 nations in the world, and whatever we do will pull all ships up, no matter if they want to sink themselves.
It's also that the government haven't changed yet. So we actually have the US government on our show tomorrow, so that will be interesting to see what they are going to talk about and what they're going to do now the last months they are in power.
Yes, but you know, the world is a different world. America is still very important, obviously, but we live in a world where China is also very important, what they do. There are other countries like Brazil who are now very important, India, Vietnam. You can list a long number of countries out there that have the political power, the growth, and also the vision of moving on climate change.
One observation I've made coming here, it's not many electric cars, but actually a lot of taxi cars are electric, and I haven't seen a single Tesla. I haven't seen a single European manufactured electric car. They are all Chinese. So there's a big debate there. Is it really a good thing to put a tariff on electric cars in Europe and US? I don't think so, because I think that we will get behind. I mean, we're not slowing down competition by, don't catch up and put a tariff on everything. We are winning competition by being better, not increasing tariffs. So my prediction is that in the future, I think that most cars here will be Chinese and electric.
So I just want to say to the viewers out there, you're listening to us chatting here at the end at the wrap-up, and we're going to have to end literally in a minute or so, but just to say, if you think anything you've heard on the show today, or anything that you've heard in conversation here between Carl, Ingmar and myself, and maybe you have a difference of opinion, that's fine. Share your ideas on We Don't Have Time social media, or WeDon'tHaveTime.org, log into that and you can take part in the conversation. That would be really super, and that's great. Carl, I'm going to give you the last word because you're our special guest right now. Are there any things already percolating in your creative head about things you want to cover in the next few days for the We Don't Have Time shows?
Yeah, no, I'm in the search for not only good stories, but stories that unite us. And I think there are so many here and so many brilliant people who I'm looking forward to meet. So I'm really hopeful.
That's super. I think we're there, Ingmar. Is there anything I'm missing?
Yeah, I think you're missing the whole point here. Carl has been running around COP and made a short film about it. So I think we're going to watch that.
Okay, we're going to watch the short film. I always miss something. I'm glad I've got you here, Ingmar. So let's roll Carl's short film from COP29, and we're very excited to see this, Carl.
In tough times, up against difficult tasks, I don't go in for hopes and dreams. What inspires me is human ingenuity and determination. Our ability to get knocked down and to get up again, over and over again, until we accomplish our goals.
My husband is currently on the battlefield, and actually he's protecting Ukraine over there. And I'm trying to do what I can do here to protect climate as well. In the cities near to the battlefield, they all also are caring for the climate. They're trying to present and implement projects to adapt to climate change, because that gives you as well the feeling of hope that there would be your country to live in. There would be a country after the war. There would be a country amidst climate crisis.
The lady I'm standing with, this picture, is my neighbor Florence in Karakum. In July this year, this was us standing in all that remained of her home after the devastation of Hurricane Beryl. At 85, Florence has become one of the millions of victims of runaway climate change this year alone.
So this COP is known as the Finance COP. We need more money into adaptation, into loss and damage, into mitigation, all of these areas, so that we ourselves can be more resilient nations. I know for Dominica in 2015, we were struck by Tropical Storm Erica, and then 2 years later, we were struck again by Hurricane Maria. And for us, the constant devastation, being in that constant cycle of devastation, it's not sustainable. So for us, meeting those climate finance goals is not a matter of just asking for money, it's a matter of our survival.
Great. Okay, we saw Carl's film there. It was absolutely super. There's going to be a lot more from Carl and his great work during the COP here. And then we're going to end now with a final film. It's called Weather Kids. You may have seen it before, maybe you didn't, but it's something with the United Nations Development Programme with young children, giving the weather forecasts in different parts of the world. And we'll see you tomorrow for many, many other guests. We're looking forward to it. COP29, we don't have time. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Celeste with a very special weather report. From up there to down here, everything is crazy. If we don't listen to scientists, things are going to be even crazier when I grow up. Let's look at the forecast for 2050. Heat waves will affect 94% of children, making playing outside a thing of the past. Extreme droughts will wipe out crops, killing some of my favorite foods to eat. And disasters will cost taxpayers almost $6 trillion. Of course, all of this is caused by a blanket of heat-trapping pollution in the atmosphere that we could just not put up there. But don't worry, there's still a chance of clear skies. Right now, clean energy systems are moving in from the east to the west, creating tons of cool jobs. And solar prices have dropped lower than oil and gas. Going to the satellites, it looks like a high-pressure system of grown-ups could still move in and protect kids from an avalanche of really bad stuff. Some gusty political winds ahead, but they're no match for the power of Hurricane Trinbago. That's where I'm from, my country. We'll keep you posted as we track if adults stop wasting time and fix this totally solvable problem, because it's not just a weather report to us, it's our future.